Dexter Lawrence wants out of the Giants organization, or does he just want more money? I think the second one is the truth. We'll talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Barbershop. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Barbershop here on Locked On NFL. Kevin Ostreicher from Locked On Ravens is riding shotgun with me as he does every single Tuesday. Now, let us tell you what we're going to talk about. We're going to get to at the end of the show how the Pats cannot put all of their eggs in an A.J. Brown trade. In the middle of the show, Dallas is up to their BS and shenanigans again, and they never let us down. And we'll start at the very top. Kevin and I are going to talk about Dexter Lawrence wanting out of New York. Kevin, your former coach, John Harbaugh, is now the coach of the New York Giants. When I thought about John Harbaugh, I said the things that are going to make him happy are Dexter Lawrence, the fact that they had Abdul Carter, right, the young pass rusher, Kayvon Thibodeau is still there, and Brian Burns. I said those guys look like Ravens, right? And now Big Dex says, I ain't coming. Basically, the offseason program starts for 10 teams that change coaches. And Big Dex said, I won't be there unless I get more money. I think it's a money play, but it also says that they have to take this seriously because if they don't pay him, he's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he's one of those guys. I mean, you're right, where the Ravens, they take a lot of pride, not just in their defense, but in their defensive line. And there's investment that's done there. And obviously the Giants have a plethora of talent. And, I get that it was, I guess, from a stat perspective, and it's a down year for Dexter Lawrence last year compared to what we have seen from him in terms of the stat department. But he's a guy that I think John Harbaugh would really like to coach. He's really important to that defense. And I think it'd be unfortunate for John Harbaugh if he had to send Dexter Lawrence away after, getting there and, building up the team a little bit, bringing in a lot of former Ravens as well. So, I think that for me, I don't know what the market would be for Dexter Lawrence at this point. Maybe points to like a draft night trade or something along those lines. Maybe if the Giants like somebody and the team with a late first comes up and says, hey, we want Dexter Lawrence, you can have pick 23 or something. But yeah, I think that Harbaugh would love to coach a guy like Dexter Lawrence. But, I do think that this might not be about Dexter wanting out, more about, hey, I want a little bit more money.
Give us some of that cheese, right?
Yeah, let's get a little more money on this deal. I think that might be a little bit more what this is.
Let's hear from Patricia Traynor. Then I'll come back and tell you the pros and cons and a team that I think is absolutely perfect for him at this stage of his career and where they are as a team. But here's Patricia from Locked On Giants.
On the eve of the New York Giants getting ready to start their first off-season program under new head coach John Harbaugh, word has come out that one of their longest tenured and key players is not only unhappy with his contract situation, but he also wants out. Three-time Pro Bowler Dexter Lawrence, who has been trying to get a contract extension with Big Blue that would put him back in the top 10 highest paid interior defensive linemen per year, is reportedly planning to skip the team's offseason program and has requested a trade. Interestingly, the Giants were reportedly approached about trading Lawrence last year, but they decided to keep him. And more recently, General Manager Joe Schoen, when asked about Lawrence's future with the team, said that the plan was to retain him for now. Now, even after Lawrence's decline last year, a year in which he wasn't fully healthy, Lawrence is still widely regarded as one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. Will the Giants be able to salvage their relationship with Lawrence, or is this too far gone?
All great questions by Patricia. I think he can still play. I do believe that there are probably people. I'll give you an example. In Jacksonville, Trayvon Walker had a down year, right? Because he was hurt. He played with a club on his hand. So I understand someone from around the league looking at stats saying that, okay, yeah, well, he was there for 14 games and he only got 3.5 sacks. I don't understand when local media that knows that he had a club on his hand and that he was playing through injury and trying to be there for the team for like 5 or 6 games. I don't get it when they don't put that context in. So from the outside looking in, you look down and you see a half a sack. But most people are looking back to 2024, where a nose tackle had 9 sacks in 12 games and saying, he's a nose tackle. He's an all-pro. That's what we need to get. You don't know if you're going to get that at 29 years old with coming off of an ankle injury from a 340-pound man.
Right, and if that does come with the new deal, it is definitely kind of scary. Where
and it will, because he wants more money.
Yeah, and so that's the other part here. Where, and this is something I talked about a lot in Baltimore when early in Lamar's career, we were talking about trading for every wide receiver under the sun on Locked On Ravens. It's not you're not just trading for the player, and you're not just giving up draft capital. You're also giving up a chunkier salary cap space, and sometimes that's with a deal that's already been signed. Other times it's with a bigger deal that's going to come after trading for a guy. And so again, I still think Dexter Lawrence can be impactful. And I think that the Dexter Lawrence we saw last season is not who Dexter Lawrence is, even still. But again, you make trades, and if you are talking about like first round draft capital, if that is what the Giants end up getting for him, that's a potential like 10-year starter plus player for you. Like you don't want to trade that away and just give it up and say, oh, hey, we're going to get 1.5 good years of Dexter Lawrence for a first round pick, right? You want to make sure that he is someone that can contribute for multiple seasons at a high level. And I'm not sure if the Giants would get a first round pick if he ends up getting dealt. But at the end of the day, he is someone that, while still being able to make a big impact, you have to weigh a lot of these other factors out there, which, makes a potential deal a lot more complicated than just, the straightforward situation.
Let me ask you a question. If a team called you that has the 29th pick and says, all right, Giants, look, I'll give you this 29th pick, but you got to send me Dexter Lawrence in your third rounder. They're not going to send the second rounder because it's only 6 picks back. That's not, you ain't doing a pick swap and sending an all-pro, but you could ask for a third or fourth rounder. And the reason why I said that pick is because the Kansas City Chiefs are where they are with Chris Jones. They are where they are with Travis Kelce. They have an older team. They're probably going to run the football a lot more with Kenneth Walker coming in and with Pat Mahomes coming from an injury. And it's all about titles or nothing with them. That's what it is, man. They go to Super Bowls, and they've lost a couple. They didn't make it last year because Mahomes got hurt, and a lot of people believe that's the reason. I would call them and say, you know what? I'm going to put Dexter Lawrence on the line with Chris Jones and Karlaftis for the next 2 or 3 years. I do a pick swap. Even if I give you a late second, you got to give me at least a third. Just say your third round pick, and I'd do it in a heartbeat if I'm Kansas City. Would you take that deal if you were New York?
If it was 29 and a third?
No, it's 29 for Dexter and a third.
29 for Dexter.
And a Giants third.
Yeah, I'd do that. I think that's honestly fair for both sides, like you're still getting back like decent draft capital. You already have a first round pick. So, you're getting a quality playmaker, and like, while 29 is a valuable selection, I'd be like, if I'm Kansas City and I come out of that draft and say, we got, I don't even know who it would be, like Mansour Delane and
a wide receiver
and Dexter Lawrence, or Carnell Tate maybe falls and Dexter Lawrence. I'm feeling good about that. So I think that's a really good situation. I like that one.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario. Jaguar fans are all over it, man. They want to trade for Dexter Lawrence, and I'm like, hold on, man. We can't just trade for everything. They wanted Max Crosby. I'm like, you did win 13 games last year. Slow down a little bit. All right, we'll talk about the Dallas Cowboys and the continued mess that Jerry Jones makes. Now it feels like Jerry's trying to control what agent he'll deal with and what agent he won't. David Mulligetta obviously is the agent for George Pickens. We know what happened with the situation with Micah Parsons a year ago. I think Jerry's overstepped, and I'll tell you why in just a second here on Locked On NFL. All right, today's show is brought to you and sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now, man, and it's not just about numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something I've thought about, and I've actually lived through it. I've had money. I made decent money, but the prospect of continuing to do that, along with some health challenges I have, really did cause me to go into a state of depression where I had to go and seek therapy for better health. And it's easy to put a lot of pressure on yourself without really talking about it. That lack of sleep is something else, man. And sleep deprivation can really get to you. Therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stress, the anxiety, and emotions that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When the life starts feeling overwhelming, therapy can help, man. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's better, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, Kevin Ostreicher's here with me, Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, and let's talk about the Dallas Cowboys. The barbershop is not complete without having a Cowboys story. I have talked ad nauseum about Jerry Jones drafting Micah Parsons. And then, 4 years later in his rookie deal saying, well, we had an agreement for $40 million a year. And then he talked to his agent and it went up. And then, you know what? We can't pay one guy $45 million a year. We can spread that out over. It's like, did he get too good? I mean, you drafted him to be great, and he turned out to be great, and now you can't keep him. I've heard this story too many times before. Dallas traded for George Pickens in the offseason, gave up a third-round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and George Pickens turned out to be one of the best X-receivers in the league, had 1,500 yards. And now they're right back thinking that they can't pay him, want to keep him at a $27.3 million cap hit with the salary cap. And it seems like to me, Jerry Jones is his biggest enemy.
Yeah. This is just it doesn't even necessarily shock me, like you always kind of get a headline or two or 8 million with Jerry Jones. And I feel like when you have a situation, well, look, you have talent on your roster. You have added talent to your roster, and you have given up capital to get that. You have built up, and they've lost a lot of talent as well. Like the defense isn't what it once was, but we know the expectations in Dallas every single season, regardless of how good or not that roster is. And it's within the team's best interest to keep all of the talent that they have as best of a way as they can. And so to me, I think that you just keep your guys. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. And sometimes it gets a little too complicated for certain teams. And this unfortunately feels like one of those situations.
Yeah, the goal is to win. The goal ain't to see how many talented players you can run through there to keep attention on yourself. The goal is to actually hoist the Lombardi Trophy, which they have not done for 32 years now. And I have to maybe 33 years. I have to remind everybody of that. But they're still looking around at the draft, trying to see what lines up with their needs. They're another one of those teams with two first-round picks. Here's the guys from Locked On Cowboys talking about draft needs lining up with draft position.
All these teams that we're going to talk about, they all have kind of needs that don't necessarily line up with their draft position, right? So that would be a motivating factor for them wanting to trade down a little bit just to try to get value on the player that they're trying to target, right? So,
I could also see, I could also see a situation where like they really like Reuben Bain. Yeah. Maybe they feel like 4 is a little rich, but hey, if he's there at 12, that's a much more attainable spot to get up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for a team like Tennessee, like, maybe trying to kind of add around Cam Ward a little bit, if you threw them your 12 and your 20, they would probably have to throw a day 2 pick back at you of some sort. It's probably in the 3rd round.
If Dallas trades multiple first-round picks and moves up for one player, Kevin, what you're going to have is a situation where essentially they would have traded that player for Micah Parsons, especially when you think that they still got another first-round pick. You got to do what Jerry said, man. If you're gonna trade and get first-round picks, use them on players that don't cost a bunch of money, as opposed to trading them both up and going up and getting a player that, quite frankly, isn't even close to Micah Parsons.
Right. And again, it's always about connections here, right? And obviously I'm I'm going to go through that in Baltimore with that pick 14. Oh, that's the Max Crosby pick. That's the Max Crosby pick. There are always those connections, but it's something where you would have to be like absolutely sure of it. And again, trading 2 first-round picks just seems so daunting to me, even though the Ravens literally just tried to do it. But, at the end of the day, you do have to be sure, because if that player is not as good as Micah Parsons, yes, it is not going to look good for you. And again, that's a very tall order and a very tall task, where I get it, the contract situation, and this guy's going to be on a rookie deal and you can build out your team. Well, then build out your team as well. Like, you got to also have that. So you can't have it both ways, where you're like, oh, well, we traded Micah Parsons because of this, and this, and then you don't take advantage of the things that you traded him away for. So if you're taking a guy and you trade up and you trade away, because again, a first round pick is extremely valuable. And while this class isn't as like top heavy as we've seen outside of like, the first handful of guys, if you want to secure one of those top guys, and that's totally fine. Like, I get the mindset there, but you have to be sure that that's going to be the guy, because not only would you be, having the Parsons, and especially if it is, one of these top flight defenders and guys who, whether it's Styles or Reese or Bain or whoever it's going to be, because you get the position stuff, you also have to make sure that if that guy doesn't pan out, you have to be prepared for, hey, you also got a bad deal too. It's not just the player's bad. You also traded away extremely valuable capital. And what if the 2 guys that get picked go on to be like 10-time Pro Bowlers and all that? So again, you take who was on your board, you feel confident in who was on your board, and that's how you operate. But it would be a disaster if this went the opposite way, especially because we know how much of a generational talent Micah Parsons is. And I think they just should have given him a new deal, but they decided to.
Yep. You don't trade players like that. They aren't supposed to hit the market, and you especially don't do it because you and the agent don't get along. It just does not make sense. All right, what we're going to do? Since all of these next three clips are about wide receivers, we're going to take a chance to step aside here and then come back and lump all of these things together here on Locked On NFL. But it's going to be about the Eagles, the Patriots, and the Washington Commanders, all jockeying for receivers, whether it be through the draft or free agency. We'll start talking about A.J. Brown first. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. The Everydayers Club is alive and kicking here on Locked On Podcast Network. You can look down in the description of the shows that you watch and listen to, whether it's be Locked On Jaguars, Locked On NFL, this show, or Locked On Ravens. Make sure you click into the Everydayers Club. Get access to our merchandise, our Locked On branded merchandise, as well as ad-free shows that go out to our audio partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Tap in for that and much, much more with the Everydayers Club. All right, let's get to the Patriots. So much talk about what will they do? What will they do? I mentioned this yesterday when I was on with Julian Council. The Patriots' biggest problem in the Super Bowl was their offensive line. But all I'm hearing about is them going out and getting wide receivers, particularly A.J. Brown. Is going to cost them at least a first-round pick. I don't think that they need to put all their eggs in one basket, and they got to remember to improve the rest of their team. Here's my man, Nick Cattles from Locked On Patriots.
But I do think when we talk about A.J. Brown and his ego, there's a difference between, keeping a top wide receiver involved with the offense versus forcing it to that receiver to make him happy to the detriment of the football team. And I don't think we'd see the latter. If A.J. Brown becomes a Patriot at some point, June, July, whatever, maybe draft weekend, if that ends up happening, I don't think the Patriots are going to force feed the football to Brown to the detriment of the offense, to the detriment of the team. Now, will they keep him involved? Yes, because that's what you should do.
Mike Vrabel knows A.J. Brown, but I don't know if Mike Vrabel knows the Super Bowl champion All-Pro A.J. Brown. He knows the young A.J. Brown. This A.J. Brown, while everyone says he's a great person, if you trade him to New England, he is going to want that football in his hands.
Yeah, that's something you have to weigh. And very talented player, but someone who, is it just like he needs to change the scenery, or is this just like he's and he's going to want the ball wherever he goes, by the way, but it's just
Yeah.
like, is this just like Philly isn't working out? There's a lot of weird relationships there and he's like certain weirdness, or is it just like, well, this is just kind of who AJ Brown is at this point. And again, like all the top wide receivers want the football. This is nothing new. This is not an AJ Brown exclusive situation. All top receivers want the ball. And I think that AJ Brown is probably best case scenario. I mean, at this point, I think he is best case scenario for adding another wideout to this team, which I think needs another weapon for Drake May. And I think that, again, it's not going to cost you a first-round pick. I think it makes sense. You can still improve your team in the first round while also being able to add a top-flight receiver to your roster. But you also have to be prepared. Like, you can't just bring him in and say, we're just going to plop you in this role, give you 4 targets a game, and there you go. He's not going to – it's not fly with him. Like, that's something you have to weigh. And if you think that that's not going to be the case, if you think that it's not going to be that consistent flow of targets, then maybe he's not the guy that you need to bring in the building.
Yeah, you're right about that. One thing I will say, though, is I'm not going to sit here and talk like the Pats didn't at least make it to the Super Bowl. They did. And sometimes having one player like that can really, really, truly make a difference. Another team, the team that is sitting there thinking about trading them, the Philadelphia Eagles. My man Louis DiBiase over at Locked On Eagles, his last few shows have been about wide receivers. He talked about Antonio Williams, maybe at the end of the first round, a slot receiver. Listen to who else he says. It'll probably go a long way in replenishing whatever they lose in AJ Brown. Checked out where Louis says they'll get some size and physicality.
I went with another receiver to complement Antonio Williams. I picked 137 in round 4. Notre Dame's Malachi Fields. And look, the guy ran a 4.61, not a super explosive receiver, but we took a slot receiver early on in this draft. Maybe you want to add some size now. Maybe it's a shot in the dark, dartboard throw at a bigger contested catch guy to replace AJ Brown long term. Malachi Fields, again, is he going to really separate tremendously at the next level? I don't know, but I think this is a good shot. This is, could he be J.J. Arcega-Whiteside 2.0 or Keon Coleman? Sure, but could he be a new Alshon Jeffrey?
Ooh, a little Alshon Jeffrey reference there. Yeah, but that's like I like Malachi Fields as a prospect, and I do think with a guy like Jalen Hurts that likes to pick and stick, if you want him to throw an anticipatory football, just let him put it up there with Malachi out there one-on-one, and I think he can go get it.
Yeah, he'd be really intriguing. And, they with also adding in guys like Hollywood Brown to that equation as well, and, still having Devonta Smith there, I think that would be an ideal situation for Philadelphia where, you're still getting an extremely talented player and, whatever, in the event that AJ Brown would be traded, you still get another pick to use, and it'd be really good where you're able to address not just like 1 or 2 needs early in that draft. Because again, I don't think the Eagles are going to get nothing free. I feel like it's gone too much in the other direction here where, I understand they're probably not getting a first round pick, but it feels like there is a lot more of like, oh, well, the Eagles with the money situation, they're not going to be able to get even a third for him. And I'm just like, okay, we got to calm down a little bit on that part of it. Yeah. So, and plus the post June 1st trade can be a real thing as well, where again, it's hard to say whether that would be the case or not, but maybe they just go for a draft pick in next year's draft and they trade him literally after now, because I don't believe you can designate a trade. I know you can do a cut as opposed to June 1st, but if I'm not mistaken, you can't designate specifically a trade. You have to make that trade after June 1st for it to be that. So if that is the case and they want to, because I think they'd free up actually $7 or $8 million, if I'm not mistaken, if they make it that way. So there are multiple different ways this could go for Philadelphia, but if they know that AJ Brown, I think we're going to know a lot, because if AJ Brown isn't traded during the draft or before the draft, but they still spend an early round pick on a wide receiver, then I think we know what's coming next.
It means that they have a deal, and especially if the Patriots use that pick on a position that that they need. This ain't the NBA. We don't do draft and trades here. If you draft them, they're going to be yours, man. So we'll see how that works. The draft, in my opinion, has a couple of hot spots where it really, really starts. I don't anticipate the Jets doing anything crazy at 2. Arizona, though, and Monty Ossenford has shown a propensity to do things. Last time they had the 3rd overall pick, they actually made a trade. They allowed somebody to come up and get Will Anderson, Houston. And I still wish that wouldn't have happened. I think they were picking at 3 when that happened. But the draft for me, when I look at it, number 7 is wild because Washington is the one team that outside of quarterback, they could literally take anything. They can take Sonny Styles. They can take an edge rusher. They can take the best corner in the draft. They can take Caleb Downs. And they can even go offense. Take Carnell Tate. Here's my man David Harrison saying it might be the best pick.
If you want Carnell Tate, you got to go Carnell Tate. And I think he's honestly the best guy for this team in this position right now. You talk about best player available. You talk about filling needs. I've always told you guys it's more of a Venn diagram, and you want to nail a player that's right in that middle part of that Venn diagram because while you need a lot of good players, the bottom line is I think that when you look at consistently good players, they have top-end players at edge. They have top-end players at the wide receiver position. And, of course, you always want to have a quarterback.
No doubt about it. Good teams have players like that. You look at Jackson Smith and Jigba. The thing with Carnell Tate is you say, okay, what does he give us? Well, he gives you a guy that's used to sharing the ball at Ohio State, right? And we've seen that has worked out with Jackson Smith and Jigba and all of the other guys that have come out of Ohio State because they don't sit there and whine and cry about the ball. But for the Washington, he gives them a stick mover, a physical, big, thick wide receiver at about 6'2", 200 pounds that can also run to go along with Terry McLaurin. I think he'd be a perfect pick for the Commanders.
Yeah, I like this a lot. And, you know, you can never have enough weapons. You can never get enough weapons for your quarterback. And I think for a guy like that to be paired up in that offense, and again, like I feel like it always happens, but this is a what have you done for me lately league. And obviously the Commanders had a down year last year, but you know, we need to not forget that this team was in the NFC Championship game 2 years ago and the talent is still there, right? The defense, I think, and you know, how old they are in certain positions. I think that's something that people are looking at, but they're going through a bit of a, all right, let's go through a transition. They're bringing it off AOA on a $100 million deal. They have guys in the building. I think the best thing that you can do for a young quarterback is, again, I wish the Ravens had done this with Lamar, and they already have Terry in the building, so it's a little different than Lamar's situation because they already have a star on a big contract. But this is how you capitalize, right? Because this is a premium position. I don't know how long Terry's going to be in Washington for. This could maybe be like the passing of the torch, and obviously the same school thing makes it cool too. But at the end of the day, like, if you get, because who else is it, right? That's the thing. Who else is it in Washington that you can truly trust? And I think that Carnell Tate has the ability to come in there and actually be a guy that gives you instant impact, day one ability. And I think there's a way that he is a top 5 pick in this class. Like, he is that talented and that good. But if Washington's able to get him at 7, I think that'd be a steal.
I think what they did in free agency kind of signals that they're not going edge rusher because they signed 2 guys, albeit they didn't really like break the bank with one of them. But they did get 2, and they're bringing back Dorrance Armstrong from injury. And I think sometimes we forget about guys who are hurt and ended the year on injury reserve. I think Dallas is 1, 2, 3 at edge is pretty dang on good, and I think they're going in another direction. No need to go in another direction here from the barbershop because we're here each and every day for you. Tyler Rowland will be here in the morning with a double shot of espresso to wake you right on up, and we'll be right back here in the middle of the day in the barbershop to keep you abreast of what's going on around the National Football League by using the clips from our local experts. We will see you later. We thank you for making us your first listen. We don't take you for granted here on the #1 podcast network, #1 sports podcast network, Locked On NFL.